Wonderful. I think we can get started. Great. So good evening to those of you tuning in from Australia, and guten Morgen to our German audience. We are delighted that so many of you have decided to join us for today's industry-focused webinar on the topic of recycling and waste management. My name is Enrica, and I'm a senior consultant with the German Chamber of Commerce, and I will be hosting tonight's discussion of what we feel is an incredibly interesting panel of experts. Now, Australia does count as one of the world's most wasteful countries, and alarming statistics highlight that waste generation is only set to increase due to urban sprawl and population increase in the years ahead. And whilst recovery and recycling rates are increasing steadily, many material recovery facilities are not yet adequately equipped. State and territory governments are eager to tackle the challenges ahead, emphasized by the fact that ambitious policy frameworks have been put forth to accelerate Australia's roadmap to a truly circular economy. So here to provide an overview of the developments in the industry, as well as the challenges and opportunities ahead, is therefore Heiko Stumpf, Director at Germany Trade and Invest for Australia and New Zealand. He will be followed by Kieran O'Connor, Investment Lead for Recycling Industry Support at Sustainability Victoria, who will give us some insights into the opportunities which exist in the state of Victoria specifically. Professor Dr. Gerhard Jansen, CEO of Martin Biopower and Senior Partner with Jansen and Maluga Legal, will outline the industry discourse around the issue of waste to energy specifically and its potential for expansion in the Australian market space. And lastly, here to share with us a real-life example of an innovative recycling technology is Professor Thomas Maschmeyer, professor at the University of Sydney and co-founder and principal technology advisor with Lysella Holdings. Welcome everyone, and thanks so much for sharing your expertise with us this evening. Some housekeeping items just before we get started. My dear colleague Eva is providing the IT support tonight. Thanks a lot for your help, Eva. Please do feel free to share with us any questions you might have using the chat function throughout the webinar, and we will be permitting for a Q&A session at the end of our speakers' presentations. Right, so without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Heiko.
Thank you very much, Enrica, for the introduction. I think I will start with trying to share my screen, and I hope it worked well. And with this, I think before I go into the presentation, I start with a quick introduction about who we are and what we do. As Germany Trade Invest, we are the foreign trade and investment promotion agency of the German government. As such, we operate under the umbrella of the Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Energy in Germany. And we, of course, also have a close cooperation with the worldwide network of German chambers also here in Australia. Our mandate is somewhat twofold. We assist international companies that want to establish a business presence in Germany, but we also provide export market information for German companies that want to explore business opportunities in foreign markets. And in this context, I want to make a summary about developments and opportunities in the Australian waste management and recycling industry. So that's a bit difficult, but I want to start with the statement that Australia has to handle ever increasing amounts of waste. As we can see, in the last 20 years, the amount of core waste that was generated, core waste means waste excluding the ash produced by power stations, more than doubled to almost 54.5 million tons. That data relates to 2016-17. That's unfortunately still the most recent data we have covering all waste streams and covering the whole nation. This is because the last national waste was published in 2018, but we expect that there will be an updated report published probably next month in November 2020. And the Australian government already set aside some funds to increase the frequency of these reports in the future. So we are hopeful that we can in the future work with more updated data. But here we can also see that Australia managed to increase its recycling rate massively from less than 10% to almost 60%. But at the same time, the amount of waste that goes to land stayed almost stayed constant. It's still more than 20 million tons per year. So that means the increase in recycling was somehow taken up by the overall increase in waste generation. And we expect that even though the waste generated per capita will continue to decrease, that the amount of total waste generation will still see some moderate growth rates in the midterm. This is mainly due to population growth. So before the pandemic, the Australian population grew by 1.6% per year, or almost 400,000 people. And the main driver for this is immigration from overseas, and we can expect this immigration will pick up again after the pandemic. When we then have a detailed look at the recycling data, it's very interesting that there are quite significant differences between the recycling rates in certain waste streams. For example, construction rate and metals score very high recycling rates. Paper and glass, they are somewhere around the average. And it's very noteworthy is the extremely low recycling rate for plastics with only 12%. But if you interpret this data, I think the most important point is that all these recycling figures include substantial amounts of exports. So that means not all this recycling takes place here in Australia, but these numbers includes material that's shipped and to be supposed to be recycled then overseas. For example, for plastic recycling, the export ratio is almost 70%. That means domestically here in Australia, maybe only around 100,000 tons of plastics were recycled. And for metals, the export ratio is about 50%. For paper, it's still around 40%. So that shows there is a huge reliance on exports within the Australian recycling industry. And in the last financial year, Australia exported almost 4.4 million tons of waste materials. As you can see, that mainly consisted of metals, plastics, and paper. And when it comes to plastics, this also included large amounts of unsorted mixed plastics, which are often highly contaminated. Like other waste, most of these mixed plastics were in the past mainly shipped to China. That then, however, changed dramatically when China imposed harsh restrictions for waste imports, limiting the acceptable contamination levels to 0.5%. But Australia then found other destinations to where to export waste. For example, we see a huge increase in waste shipments to Indonesia, Malaysia, or other Asian markets like Vietnam. But this high reliance on exports in the Australian recycling industry becomes less and less unsustainable, because also other countries are now starting to restrict the import of waste. Therefore, the Australian government responded with an ambitious national waste policy, which stipulates numerous targets. A key measure is the implementation of export bans for certain waste streams, and moreover, the national waste policy also aims to achieve an average resource recovery rate of 80% by 2030. So that would mean an increase by 20% from the current level. This mentioned export bans will be implemented in successive steps. The whole process will start in January next year with unprocessed glass, followed by mixed plastics and tires. And a very important step will then be in July 2022, when also the export of sorted single polymer plastics will be banned, and eventually also mixed paper will be imposed with an export ban. But it's very important to note that these export bans, they are not all encompassing. They mainly relate to unprocessed materials. For example, in the case of plastics, it will still be possible to export materials that has been sorted, washed, and reprocessed for further use, for example, in the form of pellets. And the important thing, however, is that this capacity to sort and reprocess all this waste does not yet exist here in Australia, and therefore must be built in the coming years. And therefore there's a significant requirement to invest in domestic recycling capacity. So the export ban alone means that Australia must handle an additional 650,000 tons of waste per year. And on top of this then comes, of course, the recycling targets that want to increase the general recycling amount. So for example, if Australia wants to achieve a recycling rate of 80%, an additional 50 million tons of waste will have to be diverted from landfill per year. And there are estimates that to achieve this increased average recycling rate, Australia needs additional plastic recycling capacity of at least 800,000 tons per year, and probably even more than that. So to facilitate all this required investment for recycling capacity, the Australian government established the Recycling Modernisation Fund, which provides direct cash incentives for investment in recycling capacity. This fund is provided with $380 million. The federal government in Canberra, they contribute $190 million, and the rest is contributed by the states and territories who also administer these funds. And one of the first projects under this program is a $21 million upgrade of a material recovery facility in Canberra, which will sort around 37,000 tons of waste per year. And the government in total hopes that together with private contribution that this recycling modernization fund will generate recycling investment of around $600 million. So go this way. So this, of course, also offers opportunities for German companies to provide solutions for the challenges in the Australian waste industry. I don't want to go too much into detail here, but one challenges are commingled and highly contaminated municipal waste streams. In the current situation, many Australian households, for example, have only one yellow recycling bin where plastics, glass, metals, and paper are collected together, and this leads to high contamination levels, for example, with glass fragments. And many material recovery facilities in Australia currently still lack the sufficient equipment to sort this contaminated waste streams. So there are huge opportunities to provide sophisticated sorting equipment. And of course, also the demand for plastic recycling equipment will increase. For example, there will be increased demand for washing machines or machines for palletizing plastic. But it's not only the government that starts initiatives to improve recycling, also the private sector joins in. One example is the Australian packaging industry, and via its industry body, the Australian Packaging Covenant Organisation, The sector formulated the so-called national packaging target for 2025. There is a number of ambitious goals, for example, to increase plastic packaging recycling to 70% and ensure that there is an average recycled content in all packaging that comes to the market of at least 50%. To achieve these targets, there is still a requirement for increased efforts. For example, the latest results show that the recycling rate for plastic packaging is only 16% in the moment, and that packaging only consists of 35% recycled content. So there is still a lot to do, but the Australian packaging industry rises to the challenge, and many companies start activities. For example, packaging giant VC intends to invest $500 million in the next years. VC just recently bought the glass manufacturing business from the American company in Illinois here in Australia, and intends to increase the content of recycled content of glass bottles from currently 1/3 to 2/3. So company boss Anthony Pratt already announced that he will invest to upgrade the technology of this Australian glass manufacturing plants. And the Pact Group will invest $500 million in existing and new facilities to increase recycling. One major project is a new 45 million plastic recycling plant in Albury, which is constructed together with joint venture partners like Cleanaway and Asahi Beverages. And this facility will recycle more than 20,000 tons of PET bottles per year. Also, Coca-Cola mentioned plans to build a plastic bottle recycling plant in Australia together with French company Veolia, although there are no confirmed details yet. There are also many initiatives from supermarket chains. For example, Woolworths works to reduce packaging in general and also wants to increase the recyclability of its private labels. Coles reported that it already diverts almost 80% of its waste from landfill, and Aldi also pledged to drastically reduce plastic packaging in the next 6 years. I want to conclude with this slide, which shows that Australia not only needs to increase recycling of packaging, but also has to handle an increasing amount of packaging waste. According to forecasts, the packaging consumption in Australia will increase by an average of 2.5% until 2025, with substantial increases in the consumption, for example, of paper and cardboard and for plastics packaging. I think with this, then I hand back to Enrica, and we are more than happy to answer any questions.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Heiko. I think you've given a really good first overview of what the waste management industry is structured like. You've also very conveniently already addressed some specific recycling capacity requirements which are needed by Australian states. And on that note, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Kieran O'Connor, who will be able to share with us an in-depth analysis of the state of Victoria specifically and its recycling and waste management targets and opportunities ahead. Kieran, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Sorry, I'm just having one little mishap with my presentation. Just give me 1 second. Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Kieran O'Connor, and I am from Sustainability Victoria, and I work as the Investment Facilitation Lead. First off, Sustainability Victoria, where we are a Victorian state authority, and sorry, I'm having one issue with my slides. 1 second. There we go. Sorry about that. So yeah, so who is Sustainability Victoria? We are a Victorian authority which has an objective to facilitate and promote environmental sustainability in the use of resources within Victoria. So we do this in a number of ways, through campaigns, education, strategy and planning, right through to funding and grant programs. So I first wanted to start by giving you an overview of the waste resource and recovery sector here in Victoria. Obviously, Heiko has talked about at length from a national context, but I just want to give you the Victorian context. And this data is from 2019, so a little bit more up to date compared to what Heiko had. In Victoria, we generate 15 million tonnes of waste per year, but we recover approximately 70% from landfill. So slightly higher than the average, but still a lot of work that could be done. And really, if you look at the bottom three graphs, you'll see where the opportunities are for within Victoria. As Heiko talked about before, we're typical of most regions. We have a strong construction and demolition sector, so we recover nearly 90%. But there is work to be done on recovery of our mixed streams. But the biggest opportunities are in the recovery of our municipal streams of waste, where we currently sit at only 43% recovered, diverted from landfill. Also to note, of the 90% of diverted materials that remain in Victoria, 10% get exported. And again, I won't go into too much detail, but 57% of all plastics that are recovered in Victoria are sent overseas for recovery, 40% of paper and cardboard, and 33% of metals. Again, Heiko's covered this well already, so I won't really speak about it. Just to say that obviously it's a 4-stage process. The ban's coming in place starting in January of next year, and following on from the China sword policy, we have also seen stricter measures being implemented by Southeast Asian markets, where we would export our plastics particularly, and that's where we would have an effect. So, but what this really means is we're going to have increased waste material here in Australia, and this opens up large opportunities to recycle and reprocess these materials, and I'll go into them in a little bit of detail. So what's been the Victorian response first? So in February of this year, we announced the Recycling Victoria economic policy, which is a $300 million commitment, slightly different to $300. This is a transformative policy to reform the waste and recovery sector here in Victoria. Its focus is on driving innovation and investment in the sector, whilst also generating jobs and reducing emissions. But it also signals to industry that we are open for business and investment across the sector. We have a range of industry incentives that are part of the expansion, and this is expanding collection, sorting, first and secondary processing, right through to the manufacture of recovered materials. And our priority areas right now will be organics, plastics, glass, paper and cardboard, and hazardous waste. And I'll highlight some of the industry investment which is part of this package. So as you can see, around 125 million will be allocated for industry investment, with the biggest one being $58 million for the Recycling Victoria Infrastructure Fund. And this will target that large scale infrastructure that we need within the industry. We also have $11.5 million towards a hazardous waste fund, $10 million towards a waste to energy fund, which I'll speak to further. And to note, we will have $25 million towards a material acceleration package. And this is to encourage end buyers for the recycled materials. So it's really no good if we start recovering all these materials if we don't have that end market demand. So we have allocated $25 million towards a package to create this demand. And that follows on from a lot of research and design we've done in the past. There will also be a $17 million business innovation center and a fund to go with it. And this is targeting collaboration and partnerships between industry, research institutes, government, and industry associations for innovative ideas in the circular economy. And lastly, a $7 million fund for expanding the waste data systems and digitalization. Also, the policy caters for the establishment of a Victorian Waste Authority and Waste Act. And as you can see, lastly, there is obviously the recently announced 190 million Recycling Modernisation Fund that Heiko's already spoken to. Again, you'll see the targets that Heiko has spoken to already, so I won't go into it. But in addition to the grant streams, the recycling policy has also implemented a number of policy measures to drive these changes. and the introduction of a 4-bin household waste system here in Victoria. So at the moment in Victoria, we generally have a 2 to 3 bin system, but we're moving to a 4-bin system. So we'll have a separate bin for food and organics. We will have a separate one for recycling, another one for glass on its own, and then a 4th one for your normal garbage. Another economic incentive here in Victoria, and we are the last state to do this, is to introduce a container deposit scheme, and this will be rolled out between 22 to 23. Also, there is a stage increase to the landfill levy here, you might know as a gate fee. So over the next 3 years, it is going to rise from approximately $65 per tonne for municipal waste up to $125, so effectively doubling. And this obviously has an economic driver for reform. So I just wanted to touch on the waste to energy, as I'm sure plenty of people listening today are keen to understand what Victoria is looking to do in this space. So the good news, the Victorian government is interested in investing in this space, but is keen to see best practice in the state. But the government has also indicated that it does not want to see this happen at the expense of recycling materials first and foremost. And to this end, the policy sets out a cap on the amount of material that can go to thermal waste to energy facilities at 1 million tonnes per annum. This is still being developed at the moment and in consultation, and a policy statement by the Victorian government should be released by the end of this year or early 2021. Now, to note, the cap does not apply to pure organic streams, for example, being treated by anaerobic digestion. And as I touched on earlier, there will be a $10 million waste to energy fund targeting these organic waste energy projects coming out early next year. There is also a commitment by the government to review that cap regularly. So the next couple of slides, excuse me, I just have a drink of water. So the next couple of slides speak to the key materials that are being targeted under the Recycling Victoria policy. And these are basically areas where we do not have the capacity currently within Victoria to meet the upcoming export bans. So plastics, the opportunities will be in reprocessing capacity for all types of plastics, but particularly plastics 3 to 7. So we do have a mature enough market on clear PET, so food grade, but we really have opportunities in polymers 3 to 7. And as Heiko said already, there's opportunities in separating the polymers to meet the export bans, and also there will be opportunities in remanufacturing the plastics. As 63% of all plastics that are recovered already in Victoria are exported for recovery. And it is anticipated by 2025, we will need an additional 280 to 300,000 tonnes of capacity for plastics. So paper and cardboard, as you're probably well aware, it tends to need larger scale investment. So there's large scale opportunities for paper separation at the MRFs, but also pulping facilities. There's also additional capacity to manufacture packaging materials such as tissue, eggs, and boxes being the obvious one. With organics, there's opportunities for additional transfer stations, and also, as we've touched on before, anaerobic digestion. So like facilities we already have here in the Yarra Water, we're wanting to grow this market, but also we do want to cater for smaller projects like open and in vessel and waste avoidance. When it comes to glass, it's not as critical as it has been in the past, and this is mainly due to building up capacity in the market through the likes of Alex Fraser, who are processing lower grade glass into a bitumen supplement to be used in road construction. But there is opportunities with the new curbside glass bin and the container deposit scheme. We're going to need additional beneficiation capacity in the state. So there is existing bottling plants here within Victoria, and there is opportunities to provide beneficiation glass to these bottling plants. With tires, there's opportunities to process the chrome granules and powders to meet that export ban again. And then when it comes to textiles, we have small niche projects already up and going in like carpet recovery, but there's a critical gap in the market with the majority of textiles going to landfill, 98%, and the government does have an appetite to recover, and there is significant opportunity to increase that recovery. And then lastly, hazardous waste. We already have a funding program up and running, as we discussed earlier, but there is opportunities to increase the capacity to safely and effectively manage solvent waste, such as expanding distillation facilities. So in summary, there is sector and policy changes that are transforming the waste industry in Victoria. There are significant government funding programs underway and being rolled out. And there's investment opportunities available both now and into the future to meet the capacity requirements Victoria needs. And lastly, I would encourage you to get in touch regardless of what funding may be available or now or into the future, and we can speak further on any investment proposals you may have. And on that note, here's my contact details. Happy to take questions at the end. And now I'll hand you back over to Enrique to introduce the next speaker.
Thanks so much, Kieran. That was a great overview of Victoria's response in particular in light of Australia's waste challenge. You did also touch on the subject of waste to energy, including some of the hesitations, which I think it's fair to say do still exist in some of Australia's states when it comes to investing into these technologies. So here to talk about the benefits behind waste to energy solutions, and as well as the current industry discourse around this topic area, is Dr. Professor Gerhard Jansen. Thank you, Gerhard. You can take the word from here.
Okay, thank you, Enrica. I hope you can hear me now. I would like to begin by respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm here in Perth, the Whadjuk people of Noongar Nation, and I pay my respect to the elder past, present, and future. So I don't want to give you a long presentation which tells too much about the companies I'm working with. I just want to give you a small overview what waste to energy means in the current market. So Western Australia has actually at the moment no European style working or rest of the world style working size waste to energy plant. Australia has a history, and in this time we had massive issues with emissions which throw back the entire industry for decades because the community acceptance was very, very low. In the meantime, that changed. I can give you a short introduction of myself. When I came here and started the project with Martin and Martin Biopower 7 years ago, I had a meeting with a state minister for environment, and when I explained to him waste to energy, I got the short answer which said we have huge deserts and we can dig a hole in the desert to bury our waste, and that is effectively without the recycling practically what we still do in most of our states. So landfill is the main solution, and the main solution means that in the end, we still poison our land as many decades before, and as other countries did for many years. What is the background behind that? We need technology to do what waste to energy does, and experience and investment. Three very important components. Just to speak about Martin and my background, Martin is a pioneer. The patent of the reverse grade is in the family of Martin, exists more than 3 generations now, and the technology is proven and run in a lot of, I come to this a little bit later, a lot of plants all over the world. On the left side on my slide you see a plant in Amsterdam, which burns approximately 1.4 million tons per annum of Dutch and English waste. And
yeah, maybe I can just, sorry, just to interrupt, but you just mentioned your slides and you haven't actually shared your screen with us. So maybe you can still do that. I think that would help our audience to see.
I don't know what I shall, what else I shall do to do this. Then just press the button.
Just on the bottom of the screen should say share screen, and then you'll be able to select screen.
Yes. Do this.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
So sorry about that. So I just quickly go back. That's a picture of the Amsterdam plant. So German companies as engineering companies come here with the technology to manufacture and produce worldwide waste to energy plants. The waste to energy plants are a main part of our work, plus composting. And I will go to this in more details a little bit later. We, as Martin Biopower, are the 50-50 partner of Martin. Martin, of course, is a Munich company, and we practically are offering to build turnkey plants and deliver key equipment. And we want to work together as much as possible with local manufacturers. And in this, I don't want to go in too much into detail of the technology, but I show a little bit a typical plan, and that will be interesting for the audience because that is practically where German technology will be brought in. So you see, if you don't know how this kind of plants work, on the left side, the waste comes in with trucks, then you have a bunker. The waste is taken from a bunker onto a grate. You see this as number 5, where the waste goes in, which is just rest for 3 days. Then it's dry enough and taken into the system. In the system on the grate itself, it is burning. Air is used, and in this process, then the main process starts. One part of it is converted into energy that can be used in different ways. I come to this later. Electricity, steam, all sorts of energy can be used. And of course, since the mid-90s in Germany, we have a filtration system because, of course, the waste to energy process does not add any hazardous components. These components are all in our waste. So when we wear a blue jacket, then we're wearing heavy metals next to our body, and this comes out when it's burned. So therefore, it must be filtered, and it's a huge part of the investment nowadays to get clean air. Therefore, the clean air policy, which started in countries like Northern Europe, Germany, and Northern America, means that our plants can stay everywhere. We have plants with ski slopes in the Nordic countries. We have, when you ever went in Paris from the Louvre to the Eiffel Tower, you passed 3 of our plants, and probably none of you ever noticed. So they are in the middle of the city. The emission and the effect to the environment can be reduced to nearly nothing. Every exit of an autobahn has more emission than our power plants. Therefore, we produce energy, huge part of this. The plants make only sense from 200,000 tons per annum onwards, and we then provide energy approximately to 150,000 households. So when the structure grows, the energy, of course, and the output grows as well. In this part, we're working together with German and international companies who deliver this technology. This is during the production time, during the installation and establishment, a huge a workforce a driver with approximately 500 people working for 3 years to build such a plan. And afterwards, a plan is, of course, run with less personnel, approximately 40 to 60 people working around the clock for such a plan. So this investment must be financed. In Australia, most of the companies struggle to do this. Most of the cities struggle to do this in projects of the size. We have a very, very good structure here in Australia generally, and we heard already from the two colleagues, especially from Kieran, very good opportunities. I can add the Clean Energy Finance Corporation from the Australian government running a 200 million early stage clean technology fund, which gives opportunities to start projects like this. But as I said, we right now have some projects which are approved and starting, like here in Western Australia, Kwinana, but nothing is ready and nothing is running right now. The capacity of this, so just give you a little size. I don't want to go into the technology because that's not interesting for our meeting today, but the size can be seen here. This is not a very tall or very small man. We deliberately choose a very average man of 1.78 meters so that you have a good feeling for the size of such a grate in the middle compared to the picture I showed you before. In Australia, we use the same structure like the EU waste hierarchy, and I show you where we are here in Australia as well, because in Australia we have, of course, prevention, reuse, recycle, recovery, and disposal. So the question is, and that is something Kieran just mentioned, that waste to, when we have more waste to energy, then we have less recycling. And that is a myth. That's unscientific. And it's unfortunately something I'm fighting since I came here, because every science in Europe shows that the conditions, when the conditions are good for recycling, then the conditions are good for waste to energy. When the conditions are bad for waste to energy, then we have predominantly landfill. Why is that so? That's very simple. Nobody wants to take anything, not even the waste to energy industry wants to take anything out of the recycling stream. Why? You must, most of the politicians stay in front of me, oh, we're taking away your product. No, recycling is not endless. Everything will go in the end into the waste to energy or into the landfill, because I saw Heiko's picture saying we have 40, 50, 60% of recycling. Now that's true when you calculate what comes into the recycle company at the front door. But recycle companies produce waste as well, 40, 50, 35 to something between 35 and 65% of that, what goes into a recycle company comes out as waste. So the waste to energy technology is not fighting recycling. In the end, we have only a certain amount of time where we can use recycled products. Paper, for example, the fiber at one stage breaks. We are more than happy that paper is used and reused and new paper is built from this. But by sheer physics and structure, it can't go forever. So nowhere in the world a proper waste to energy company would fight recycling. The material is at one stage in a good country coming to us anyway, and in a bad country is going underground into one of the big holes in the desert. Therefore, the fighting of the waste to energy plants is fighting the conditions we need for recycling. And I heard what Kieran said regarding the cost per ton, and that was for many, many years a big fight, because everybody tried to keep it as cheap as possible to have the rates low. And simply, you can't recycle and you can't build a waste to energy plant when the ton of waste is solved in apostrophe to a price of $30 to $50. That is calculated in euro, 20 to 35 euro. Nobody can build a proper a recycle stream. Nobody can build a waste to energy plant if there are not super special conditions under these conditions. If you want to have overall the most and the largest form of recycling, you will increase the price for waste per ton. And slowly, Australia comes there. And you will see, as soon as the price is right, recycling will extremely go up, and waste to energy plants will come to solve our landfill problems, because we have massive landfill problems. I'm living here in Western Australia, and one of the plants, and that's not a secret, is pushing with every new rainfall, is pushing the poisonous groundwater into our wonderful ocean. And you have this on the East Coast equally, and that is not a secret. So what we really want to do is, and that is how I started in this industry before I came to Martin, we want to use the energy from waste to energy to bring it back to the recycling industry. So I, for example, started with a project in Switzerland, which is called Recycling Park. And in the center of this recycling park is a waste to energy plant. And recycling companies, who most of the time are very energy intensive, came into the neighborhood so that they could take, for example, the steam directly off, so that we did not have to convert the steam into electricity and then reconvert it into power in the companies, but they came directly into our neighborhood. And so the typical way is that when you do it well, the raw material, and with a good design and with a good structure, the raw material goes into recycling, and what can't be recycled goes into the waste to energy, and the energy out of this, in a perfect world, goes immediately into the recycling structure. And with this hand-in-hand work, circular economy can be taken very, very serious. Of course, we have heat especially in Northern Europe, used for heating of households, but a huge project will be here in Australia, and we started with that, and the waste to energy technology started with us in Vienna, will be the cooling of CBDs, because when you can produce heat, every engineer will know this, then you can produce cooling as well, same structure. So in the future, there is a huge chance, and I had already discussions with Brisbane about this, to substitute the building by building cooling system by a central cooling system for CBDs. That would be massively an advantage to our ecology, and would help us saving so much energy to cool our offices in a country which definitely needs cooling. Just what I said, to see the correlation between landfill and waste to energy, just an overview, and Eurostat is bringing this up again and again. So the correlation is very simple. You can see it in Germany. When you have a very low rate of landfill, then the country uses and has a price structure which enables the industry to start with waste to energy, and the same structure enables then recycling and composting. Countries like Romania at that time, who have no structure for that, no finance for that, have very, very low rates of recycling, no waste to energy, and work practically exclusively on landfill. And you can see this, I think this Eurostat number shows very well that there is a huge myth in the world that countries who decide for recycling will decide against waste to energy. It's the opposite. Countries who go strong in recycling, want to go strong in recycling, will produce conditions which are good for waste to energy, vice versa. Just to show you that Australia is the only continent where we are not, even in Africa, we have plans in the meantime, because it's an older slide, which I used to make everything shorter today because I only got 10 minutes. Therefore, I just show you that our company has 431 plants, more than 822 lines. Practically a third of the worldwide burned waste is in our structure. So what we want to say is Australia must hurry up, must hurry up. We're still in the situation that Australia does not produce the conditions at an entire country. In Western Australia, it's a little bit better to start overall waste to energy as the real solution for that what we can't recycle. I have still the hope that in the next 3 to 4 years, politicians will see this. And I think it was great to see when the examples from Heiko and Kieran came a couple of years ago. I was told, we solve it with China. It's much, much cheaper for the country. No, it's not. It's politically suicide, because now at that time it was China who could close the door from one day to another. And I remember when in October 2017 that was in the media, then everybody panicked because 3 months later the borders were closed. Now we solve it here, we solve it in apostrophe by bringing it to Malaysia and Indonesia. So we just delay the same problem again. When the next border closed, we will have the same problem. Australia, if we want to be taken serious, has to solve this high waste to energy as one part of it. Of course, only as one part of it. Nobody says waste to energy will do 100%. And as of course, we want to do this in cooperation, like everywhere in the world, with the recycling industry. But what we don't want is exporting into countries where nobody controls what really is done, where recycling is not used. The China export, there was a wonderful documentary in Netherlands and in Germany about it, where less than 3% went into recycling, the rest were burned. And who do you think burned it? It was us. We built at the time of the major export of Europe and Australia and other countries. We built 30 plants in China who burns this. And we were still told that never happened. So it is happening, and Australia has to do better than what we do right now. I don't want to go through the possibilities, but good technology, cutting edge technology can burn practically different calorific input. It's very important to use technology which is flexible, because the waste stream change from every 3 to 5 years because of political reasons and technology reasons. Therefore, I agree with Kieran. It has to be the highest possible technology which is used, so that an investment of 200 to 600 million Australian dollars is properly used. In this case, it means it must be flexible to adapt to changes which will come in the waste. And here again, the technology we use is the most flexible technology in the world, and therefore we have more than 33% of the market in Europe. The benefits, just to summarize, we divert from landfills, we lower greenhouse gas emissions. The energy contained in waste can be captured and reused as electricity, heating, cooling, and process steam. All plants are designed according to EU standard, operate well below emission limits. In Europe, we are approximately with 12 to 15% of the emission limits. And waste to energy plants act as pollutant sink to remove harmful materials different to landfills. And the solid residues, for example, in our structure. You see the ash and the metal coming out on the ground here in number 10 can be completely recycled. I jump over it because Enrica is already looking at me because I'm bouncing out of time.
Just a bit aware of time. No rush though.
Just skip over it. What the shares are and technology is not so important for you. I just want to show you how we integrate even in a city. The city of Roskilde is a bishop town in Denmark. And when we started building this and permission was achieved, the bishop came and said, oh, we are a big city with a lot of tourists coming to our city because of our cathedral. And the cathedral, the dome, is a very important target for the tourist. If you build something ugly, nobody will come anymore. That will have a huge impact. So he was clearly anti-waste to energy. So we came up with a solution and built this, which is an LED structure. And like every day, we burn the candle down. And that is a huge tourist attraction in the meantime. And then 4 years after that was finished, we get a reaction from the bishop who said that he was now angry for us because more pictures are taken by night from our waste to energy plant, which is vis-a-vis to the dome than from the dome anymore. So that can be used, technology can be used, and of course architecture is always a question of pricing. What I want to show you is that waste to energy is not isolated. We combine with Swiss technology, but you can combine this with any other technology as well, the dry digestion system. And the dry digestion system, like here in a container structure, which I show you with huge pedals, mixing up the waste which we put in there. So the combust with a target to combust and produce energy. This structure is used for us in Germany and by Martin for many, many years. The idea behind this is very simple, and we produce something in Augsburg, which is an interesting structure for you. In Augsburg, we combined a dry digestion system with the waste to energy plant, and we put them next to each other so that the city of Augsburg now can use the steam produced from the waste to energy to heat the dry digestion system. And we again use the gas from the dry digestion system to burn in our chamber. So this is a practically perfect cycle between the two structures, which shows that producing compost on the highest European level here in Australia is still very, very expensive. We go in very, very small units, which is good for rural areas, but not so good in cities because the price goes up. So we try to implement something here in Australia overall to connect dry digestion systems with Martin technology, or if a city does not use our technology, with waste to energy technology, and combine these two flows to achieve that not only nothing goes to landfill, but that dry digestion system are affordable for our society to make as much as possible and reuse as much as possible from our waste stream. And
yeah, on that note, I would, that's really kind. Thank you so much for that, because we still have one more speaker and I'm a little bit aware of time because we obviously still want to allow for some Q&A. Thank you so much. Great. So as you can tell, we're a little bit running over time. I hope that you guys will stay tuned. And we do like to ignite a bit of a debate here at the chamber, as you can tell. Just a quick reminder, do keep your questions coming in. We have had already some questions reach us. Just before we start our Q&A though, last up we're joined by Professor Thomas Maschmeyer, whose research focus area lies with the development and the use of advanced catalysts or catalytic systems and processes to enhance sustainability. Thomas will be introducing his innovative CAT HTR technology and what it can do in tackling Australia's waste plastic problems specifically. Thank you, Thomas, and you can take it from here. Thomas, you might still have to unmute yourself.
Unmute. You can hear me?
Perfect. Yes.
Perfect.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. I guess in the time remaining, I hope to be quick enough. So I have developed a new technology called catalytic hydrothermal upgrader technology, and now there we are. And so what that allows us to do, it's an aqueous-based system, and it allows us to take a whole range of different feedstocks, biomass, waste plastics, mixed waste plastics, etc., used lube oils, and convert that into a variety of products. And we have a variety of tunability within that process to take care of the different inputs. And really, this whole thing is designed as a catalyst to change the conversation so that we don't talk about waste, but we talk about resource. He is not cathedral-like, but maybe a little bit cathedral-like, at least in my eyes, our demonstration plant in Sydney or in Somersby, 10,000 tons a year. So we are able to do all the things that I'm telling you, I will tell you about. And if you want to come and visit, you can touch it, you can feel it, you can sniff the product. So we are able to look at biomass as well as plastics. So I'll talk about both very briefly. Effectively, what we do is we take woody biomass. Here's just some sawdust. It goes through our process, and what comes out is a bio-crude oil, and this is done to scale. So it's the same amount of chemical energy in that little bit of oil as it is in that woody biomass. Obviously, I'm cheating slightly because the sawdust has a bit of air in it as well, but you can see we are in a very highly energy dense situation. So what was not easily processable is now a dry, storable, blendable, etc. oil that I can process in a whole range of different ways in refineries. And this is just one way here I'm showing you is what's called straight line gas oil that happens in a refinery, one of those big towers. And if we mix it in, we can see that the thing starts to look more and more ugly. It gets darker and darker because of our terrible bio oil. But if you think of red wine that just has a little bit of color in it, but it's very dark, same with our oil. After the hydrotreating, it looks just beautiful. And in fact, we have letters from Chevron, ExxonMobil, from Shell that allow their refineries to buy any quantity of this oil and refine it in their refineries. So all good. So this is about not burning, but in contrast to my previous speaker, but this is about trying to keep the carbon as much as possible within the cycle. So we are focusing on making new materials out of this as much as possible. We're integrating that with a pulp and paper, the world's largest pulp and paper mill in Prince George in Canada, 6 million tons of trees a year. And our initial plant is 200,000 tons going up to 600,000 tons a year, producing this renewable feedstock for petrochemical processing to make all sorts of renewable materials, whether it's lube oils or whether it is plastics or various kinds of chemicals, solvents, etc. So much for the biomass. The waste plastics is, I guess, something that's on everybody's mind. And having seen some of the previous presentations, it's clear that there's sort of reasonably low-hanging fruit within the Australian environment in terms of the recycling quota that we have for our waste plastics. And you will all be aware of this, I'm sure, that if current trends continue, our oceans will contain more plastic than fish by 2050, and that is something that we really need to avoid. Currently, we have physical recycling. PET bottles, to some degree, are quite well recycled, and much of the rest is either put into landfill or incinerated, or indeed ends up in the ocean. So my suggestion is not to interfere, just as the previous speaker, not to interfere with existing recycling, but offer additional optionality. And what we want to do is what can't be physically recycled, we will take that before he burns it and chemically recycle it to keep that carbon in the circular economy for as long as possible. So what are we doing? What does it look like? Well, we start with an aqueous plastic waste feedstock, and that's 25% water, 75% mixed end-of-life plastic, the stuff nobody can use, bits of builders, film, all sorts of plastic packaging, etc. And that goes through our reactor. And as we process it, we do make some gases, but those gases are actually balanced so that what comes out is used to make the supercritical steam that we are using as processing medium. So the plant runs itself on the waste. And then we generate some plastic crude, some inorganics from the fillers. And this is what it looks like. This is what actually comes out of the plant. That's its product. It's continuously distilled, and we distill it to 4 commodity streams that are traded internationally. Naphtha to go into an ethylene cracker to make more polyethylene, and the straight run gas oil, which I can make a whole range of different things from, whether it's fuels or chemicals. And then the light cycle oil and waxes speak for themselves. Industrial wax is very profitable. And the heavy wax residue, still a liquid, is an excellent additive to bitumen. And we have offtake agreements for all of these things. And the inorganics go into, brickworks, cement works, etc. We have some processed water, and this processed water is recycled largely, but at a certain moment we have too much salt and we need to treat it to some degree. But all of that treatment can be done with existing water treatment facilities at industrial parks, etc. So it's a circular economy, so this thing has to pay for itself. So what does it look like? Well, if I want to make Australia 50% plastic neutral, and I'm assuming here that I'm not getting paid to take the plastic, but I also don't have to pay to take the plastic. So the assumption is it's a zero cost input. Then our plants would cost $2 billion to make Australia 50% plastic neutral. You may think, well, that's a lot of money. It's the same price as one of the new submarines that have been ordered, and I think we ordered about 32 or so of them. So I think we could spend maybe the money on one submarine less and make Australia 50% plastic neutral. How does it come out in terms of the economics? Australia roughly makes about 3 million tons of plastic waste a year on a dry and S3 basis. If I say I can have access to half of that, that's 1.5 million tons. Our yields, our liquid yields are very high. They're more than 80% on a carbon basis. So that gives me 1.2 million tons of oil a year. That's about 8.8 million barrels at a price of 60. Today it's 53, but forgive me, at a price of $60 a barrel, that's about $500 million a year. So you can see very, very quickly I can pay off my plant. So the internal rate of return is around 20 to 25%, and that is without subsidies and assuming that all of my product has the same price as crude oil and that I do not get paid to take any of the waste. So it has a lot of buffer in it as well. We are very advanced in our design, plant design and permitting. We're building one in the UK in Wilton. What you see, the green is the actual mixed waste recycling facility. In the UK, they're not sorting plastic as well as they do in Germany. The orange thing is our actual plant, and then you can see the various tanks for product storage, etc. So you may think, well, he's a professor, he may have smoked something, can we really believe what he's saying? We went in as one of more than 70 entrants into the Global Packaging Prize Challenge. It was run by the FlexPack by the Sustainable Packaging Coalition. And I have to say, I didn't know who they were. However, once we won the prize and our team put it all in, I had a look who they were. Well, it was these companies and their technicians and their engineers choosing us to be the best recovery technology for these kinds of wastes, and that made us very happy. And we also given our technology as a charitable gift to the nation of Timor, East Timor, and we're trying to help it to make it the world's first plastic neutral country. One of our plants should be able to take all of their waste, and this is the signature or the signing ceremony of them getting eternal access for free to a license to our technology. It went up into the Australian, the UN was gifted the speech by Mr. Morrison about the catalytic hydrothermal reactor, so he actually enjoyed it and seemed to understand what's going on, so that's fantastic to have made that impact on the political side. But given that this is a German sort of, I guess, event, I just also thought I'll let you know that we have a global licensee, a Muro technology for the KETA-HDR technology as applied to plastics. And we have a German sister company, Muro GmbH, for all European projects. And their contact details for our business development guy, our managing director there. We have co-investors in Germany, EGUS, it's about $1 billion worth of revenue a year of plastic joints for robots. The CEO, Frank Glaser, would, I'm sure, be very happy to talk to any of you. And we're currently in discussion with 4 German industrial parks for plants of 100 to 200,000 tons each. And they are very advanced but highly sensitive. So I can't tell you which they are, although people who know about these things can easily guess what they are. And we are currently lining up access to waste supply and have already lined up off-takers with some of the usual suspects. So that is, in a nutshell, very, very quickly, due to time, what we are doing. Happy to
Thank you, Thomas. Wonderful. So yeah, we will now open the floor for Q&A. We have received some questions already, whilst the other participants and our speakers might want to turn on their cameras again, just so we know, or the audience knows who we're speaking to. I have a question for you, Thomas, that reached us. What pre-processing does the plastic in-feed require? Quite a technical question. What are the limitations to contamination?
So if I, all this stuff goes into a mixed waste recycling facility, and they sort out the metal from the glass, from the wood, etc., etc. Once that has been done, and also the plastic stream, that plastic stream doesn't need to have much more processing. If it is shredded to pieces of about 5 centimeters, that's all we need. So it's very, very simple, and we can take all the contamination. It's not a problem because we are running our process at a high enough temperature that any contamination is taken care of.
Wonderful, thanks so much. Maybe if you also stop sharing, I might want to share my screen again, but it's not absolutely necessary either. We have one question, Kieran, you already answered it, but maybe you can answer it for the whole group again. We had a question around paper pulping facilities, which had been mentioned. What are the requirements to process, treat paper for recycling to be allowed to export after the ban kicked in?
Perfect. So there's really 3 different ways you can still export paper after the ban comes in. So one is to sort to a single type paper with low contamination levels. Then the second is to make it into a pulp. And the third option is to process it into a new product. So say like a fuel for a kiln. So any one of them 3 and you still will be able to export from 2024.
Which is great. And also another one, Kieran, I'll just keep you engaged. When will the 4 household first separation bins be introduced in Victoria?
So they'll be rolled out progressively from next year, so 2021, across the councils. You might be aware or not aware, Victoria's got 79 individual councils, so it's best that they do it themselves. So that's why it's going to be progressive. And the idea is that everyone has access in Victoria to the separation system by 2030. Now, in reality, some of it might form drop-off points. So if we talk about the separated glass stream for economics in regional areas, that might be a drop-off for the glass. And on that note, the glass stream is expected to be in operation by 2027. So overall, all by 2030.
Okay, perfect. Heiko, you also spoke about contaminated waste as being one of the sort of key problems in household waste streams currently. Are there any initiatives available for separation at source to reduce exactly that contamination?
I think that what Siren already mentioned, I think Victoria will be a role model in this regard, because it will be the first state which rolls out then the statewide forbidden recycling system. And also, 6 Australian states and territories already introduced their own container deposit schemes. Tasmania will then follow next year, and I think Victoria will be the last one then by 2024. And they are quite successful. I think so Australia was the first country with a deposit container scheme. I think they have a recovery rate of around 70%. And New South Wales here, for example, is ramping up the density of reverse vending machines. There are more than 600 now, so in the States. So there are some initiatives definitely to reduce, improve separation at source.
Yeah, great. Also, maybe one question for the group. I'm not sure to what extent we'll be able to answer this already. If not, we might reach back to the person who asked this question after the webinar. Has there been any discussion between German and the Australian governments to join fund recycling initiatives to gain greater funding, given there is a cross benefit? It's a very broad question, I feel, but maybe any of our speakers feels up to the task. Heiko.
I can maybe say something. I'm not aware if there are any bilateral discussions on this, but there are certainly discussions on the European and German level, because Europe and Germany are in the moment heavily investing in local battery cell manufacturing. And of course, the electrification of the car fleet is very important to decarbonize the mobility sector. But of course, we also want to be this process to be as sustainable as possible. And then the question of how to recycle all these lithium batteries will be very important. So the German government, for example, provides funding for several clusters for battery research, and the recycling is a major topic in this regard. So I'm more than happy to answer any more specific questions than individually.
Perfect. And then maybe I have one more question as well for Gerhard. You've been operative, as we've heard, in the Australian market for some time now, but what developments within the industry discourse are making you hopeful, in a sense, that in the years ahead, Australia will potentially also expand its investments in waste to energy technology specifically?
I would say the main development is that more and more players understand that they're not fighting each other. More and more players see that the political agenda, which is very often fueling in the beginning this discussion, does not help when you really want to go into any structure, and that is what the last 3-4 years becomes better and better. Then people understand that when we support a target, when the Australian market starts understanding that there are targets which have to be achieved, that a combination of all tools is the best structure. I remember when we had the first conferences in this regard, it was more or less clash of heads, and everybody tried to explain that there is only this solution. There's not. So the only thing I'm still not supporting is any kind of landfill, but other solutions, trying to find alternative new technologies, what we heard from Thomas as a speaker, that's super interesting, and everybody should realize that when we have new information, when we have new technology, people start thinking in new ways, and that is what makes me hopeful that this started. When I arrived here, there were 3-4 very frustrating years because everybody was fighting and everybody had the golden spoon to find the golden solution. And I think that is something which is now better and better, and that will have influence to with the decision makers, that they understand that making a decision for something is not necessarily a decision against another solution. It's only a solution against landfill.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I mean, we've run quite over time now, so I think that's pretty much all the questions we can take for today. But thank you so much for everyone who joined us this evening, and thank you for your interesting questions as well. Do feel free to connect and get in touch with any of us. Have a lovely rest of your evening. And thank you also so much for our speakers and sharing your time and expertise. To our audience in Germany, frohes Schaffen, and have a great rest of your day, and see you soon, hopefully, for our next webinar. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.